Hey everybody, John from Movie Burners here, back with another movie review, and today I'm going to be discussing the 2016 release from Robert Zemeckis, a man I've long admired, and it's Allied. Now, Allied for me was a blatant attempt at really trying to recapture the spirit, those classic romantic war films featuring Humphrey Bogart from back in the day. You know, the ones you'd really be accustomed to seeing now popping up in the likes of TCM in the middle of the afternoon, in the middle of the week indeed. And you know, the type of films that my grandfather would have had on permanently whenever I walked into his house when I was a young child. It's a romantic drama that features very little drama for me, and it's some painfully forced romance. I've honestly not seen romance done this badly since back in the early 2000s in the Attack of the Clones, and we all know how bad the romance was in that. And it's not for the want of trying, because Pitt and Cotillard really do perform quite well in this film, but you just can't fake chemistry. And there is no chemistry there. Well, at least I wasn't picking up on it anyway. Some may have done, I don't know. But beginning in 1942, within the Nazi-occupied Casablanca, the opening shot reveals Canadian paratrooper Max Vitan, played by Brad Pitt, parachuting down into the sandy dunes of French Morocco's desert tundra. And a car soon appears to whisk him off into the city, with the driver telling Max that his wife is in the blue dress. Cut to the streets of Casablanca, and there is camels, a hell of a lot of camels, kicking around. Max is wearing an immaculate suit, and he walks into the club, and after a brief glance around, he soon spots Marion, played by Marion Cotillard, who incidentally is a cigarette-smoking resistance infiltrator, disguising herself as his wife. She's apparently created quite the cover story for him too, rather bizarrely telling her group of sycophantic friends that the Canadian-born Max is a mining engineer and a native Parisian. Cue the inevitable awkwardness that follows with a terrible-sounding French accent. Thankfully, our main protagonist, however, has the sense and the quick wits to make a sharp exit. Truth be told, it was a really rather odd beginning to an even odder film for me. The American-born Pitt playing a Canadian soldier, working for the British, whilst putting on a false French accent. That was just too much for my brain to process. A short car ride and a narrow miss for a camel later, and our leading pair arrive at their temporary digs where they'll be spending the next 10 days. They're here to assassinate the German ambassador, who is hosting and throwing a lavish party. In the days leading up to said party, we see the pair go about their daily business as a fake husband and wife duo. The whole shenanigans resembling one of my all-time favourite X-Files episodes, that being Arcadia. Now, at least in Arcadia, Mulder and Scully had bucket loads of palpable chemistry, which is a whole lot more than can be said for Max and Marion. It has to be said that the pacing in this opening 45 minutes was extremely choppy at best. There's a very cool cafe scene, however, that does feature Max taking out a German officer, casually walking back to his table for a final sip of coffee, before strolling away with a degree of nonchalance that would have left a James Bond type character proud. After this, we get some unnecessary chatter scenes between the leading two that honestly feel like a half-hearted attempt at developing the relationship, and really failing to do so too. A short cameo from August Dial pops up as well. His character could have been lifted straight from Inglourious Basterds, such was the glaring similarities between the two. And finally, on the eve of the operation, a completely bizarre sex scene transpires in a car during a particularly vicious looking sandstorm. There's some rotating camera shots in this scene which were totally unnecessary, and they really left me rather bemused as to why the hell this was happening, because it added nothing to the story. Now, when the party finally arrives, the big moment we've been waiting for, it's over so quickly that you'd be forgiven for thinking, why the hell have we wasted the best part of an hour setting this up? The choreography was lacklustre, and it completely lacked any sort of suspense whatsoever. Both Marianne and Max made it out alive, surprise surprise, slaughtering everyone in the building but one woman. Even now, I'm not quite sure why they spared her. The film never does explain why they spared her, and it had absolutely no impact on the story. She didn't come back to bite them later on, so what was the point of it? I don't know. Then completely out of the blue, after the slaughter, Max blurts out to Marion, "Come with me to London and be my wife." Now this left me absolutely puzzled. I actually laughed the first time I watched this film, because I was giving them a sort of a buy up to this, because the relationship in the film was supposed to be fake, and I thought, wait, that explains why there's no chemistry, no real romance here. But it turns out there was supposed to be romance developing, and I just missed it. Oops. And now the film then jumps forward a couple of weeks. Max is in England, and a short scene plays out with him and his commanding officer, telling him that marriages made in the field never work. On reflection, I think it's perhaps some advice you should have listened to, but I digress. We then move on again, another jump in time, and Marianne is giving birth outside in London in the middle of an air raid. Now, if you'll excuse my ignorance here, I know health and safety wasn't up to the lofty standards of today, all the way back in the 1940s, but wouldn't it have been much safer giving birth to a baby inside the building? And if you really had to move the patient because of air raid, would it have not been better to go down underground into the basement? Surely, but giving birth to a baby outside in the middle of an air raid is a little bit dangerous. But it's just a whole host of inconsistencies in this film which really left me puzzled. There's another jump into the future, perhaps unsurprisingly, with the great Robert Zemeckis directing it. The couple are now living a happily ever after existence in wartime London. That is until Max gets notified by his commanding officer Frank Hessler, played by Jared Harris, to attend a secretive meeting with an overly cheeky intelligence chief played by Simon McBurney. He's rather bluntly told that Marianne is suspected of being a German spy, that the real Marianne apparently had been killed all the way back in 1941 and replaced, and that they would be running a blue dye operation, which is essentially feeding false information to a suspected spy and seeing if it gets passed on. Now, if the suspicions were proven to be true, then Max would have to kill his wife or face certain death himself on charges of high treason. Now again, I am no expert on spies and the possible punishments they could have faced if they were caught, but I'm pretty damn sure that they weren't forcibly murdered by their unsuspecting partners. This was 74 years ago, it wasn't in the Dark Ages. Now visually, this is one area I can't fault the film. Don Burgess did a great job of recreating the period. There was a few inconsistencies in there, such as regular German soldiers running around with Nazi armbands. That was historically inaccurate, but I can give him a buy on that. And overall, the film looked fantastic, and the costume designs were absolutely immaculate. Mr. Pitt in particular looking utterly dapper throughout the entire film, in a myriad of perfectly fitting suits. Musically, the film is nothing outstanding by any means, I didn't think. Alan Silvestri did an okay job. He's obviously a phenomenally talented composer, one of the all-time greats in the film business. But I just felt the opening 45 minutes, which had a strange sort of action score, wasn't in fitting with the time period, and it would have been better maybe being put onto like a Jason Bourne type modern setting. In fairness to Alan though, as the film does progress, things improve dramatically, with a lot of fairly decent violin parts, adding some hint of emotion to the proceedings, and indeed the final scene did pull on the emotional heartstrings. Now, in the final act of the film, it really follows Max's frantic attempts over a 3-day period to find out the truth about his wife. He even goes as far as flying all the way to France for one night, receiving help from the resistance, to really break into a jail and talk with the only man left alive who knew and could verify the appearance of the real Marianne Beaujeu. Now, I was expecting a twist at the end of this film, but sadly it didn't come, and I was rather disappointed by the predictable nature of the last 15 to 20 minutes of the film. It left me with an overwhelming sense of emptiness as the credits rolled, although the final shot, as I did say, was quite cool. Now, I honestly can't recommend watching this film because I thought it was extremely disappointing. It might not be for other people, indeed I have seen people praising this film, but it wasn't for me, and I'll be giving it a disappointing 2 out of 5. Remember guys, if you're enjoying the content we're putting out, then do subscribe to us on YouTube, iTunes and Google Play, whilst also giving us a little follow on Facebook at Movie Burner Entertainment and on Twitter at Movie Burners. You can also catch up with all the latest reviews we're putting out on the Movie Burner blog at movieburnerintertainment.org. Until the next time, goodbye.